Hello, adventurer. It's good to see you. You have made it to the morning grind.
Welcome, welcome.
It's the live stream at the beginning of the Geekverse, where we talk about all types of topics in geekdom, gaming, and fantasy, with an emphasis on being constructive and creating the things that we want to exist in the world.
It's all on the grind, Sizemore. Can't be too fine, can't be too coarse.
That's exactly right. There are a lot of adventures to be had today. Dungeons to explore and monsters to slay, and who knows what a random encounter might send our way. That's why we have to prepare, so settle in now for the morning grind with your favorite beverage in hand.
Tea? Or maybe something a little stronger. I've got a few bottles of the old Wynyard left.
Whatever you want. Pull up a chair.
Dude.
If you're feeling fancy, how about a cappuccino? Or a frappuccino? Or how about an espresso?
Just tea, thank you.
Sounds good to me, Gandalf. Whatever you want. I'm just glad you're here.
Everyone is welcome. You can just watch if you want. You don't have to worship anything you don't want to worship.
Thank you, Mike. But be forewarned.
Sometimes we get really strange characters around here.
Wait, what's that you say? Why can't you come and be a part of the stream?
My wife would disown me.
Oh no, I bet she'll be fine with it. Come on in.
Am I scared for my safety? No.
What are we supposed to do?
Everybody do the secret handshake.
Secret cultist handshake.
Oh, now do wizards who love each other.
This, my friend, is a science.
I still don't have gifts, but it's fine.
It's all on the grind, son. Can't be too fine, can't be too coarse.
Dude, this would be a sick place to bring the band.
Indeed it would be, Dave. It really would. I'm seeing more people coming in. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Oh, look, here's someone new.
Is this the cultist meetup?
Yes it is.
Come to hang out? Please accept me. I have nothing else.
Okay, we accept you. Everyone's welcome here.
Brought some snacks.
Well, that makes things even better.
You want some coffee? I don't drink coffee. You sure?
It's cultist coffee.
What makes it cultist coffee?
I'm a cultist and I'm drinking it.
Oh. Then I'll have some.
What exactly is going on here?
I'm seeing more people coming in. Welcome, welcome. It's so great to have you. Oh, and look, here comes another stranger.
Can we help you?
Yes, fellow cultists. I could really use some food.
Oh yeah? Welcome. We have donuts.
Oh, it's me. I'm glad I'm here. I'm sure you have a few questions for me, though.
What's your name? Who do you work for? What god do you worship?
Great questions, Rob.
I'm Steve King, and I worship Nyarlathotep.
No, not really. I'm just Heath, and I won't be worshiping anything this morning. But I will be your host. Welcome to the office. We're going to have a great time. I've got my coffee ready, because now it's time for the morning grind.
If you could become a fish, that would be amazing. Then I could command you with my mental fish powers.
Oh, no, now I'm muted. Okay, there we go. Now I'm really ready. I looked like I was sitting in a hole. All right. I think maybe I'm ready now. How is everybody this morning? I'm actually doing really well. I was doing work this morning. I have been working, on several things over here, but one little pet kind of project I wanted to do with the, was another music video. I did one. Yeah, come on now. Okay, yes. I was wanting to do a music video, so I was trying out another music video. I was working a little bit with Udio, just as kind of a pet project. But I got that done. But the music we were talking about was pretty neat. But really, what I was really experimenting with, and I've got some other experiments to do, uh, is with the video generation because I was trying to make a music video out of that. Ugh, there we go. And I'm pretty excited about what's happening. I mean, I've tried a few different like AI video experiments before. Did the Trial of St. Gabriel Kickstarter video with it as kind of an experiment to see what could be done. And, I did it. I was trying to work on a methodology, and that was, it worked. It worked. It wasn't quite there yet. I don't think it was ready to do everything that I wanted to do, but I'm working on, another project here with this music video. And wow, there is a lot more that you can do. I'm really excited about it. It might actually be time to be able to do some projects. It might finally be coming time to be able to do some projects that I want to do with video that just have not been able to be done in any way before. So I'm excited about that. I'm tempted to um, show you a little bit of it, at least some of the song, but I'm not going to. I'm going to try to have it ready for next Tuesday when Doug and Brianna will be discussing the cultists. But I really want to work on that more. But I'm not going to be able to because I'm working on other things to do with the cultists. Our main topic today is Advanced HeroQuest. So I've got this over here. Advanced HeroQuest is our main topic. I've got the digital version, thanks to Mike, so we'll be able to bring this up. And we're going to start by taking a look specifically at combat here. And actually, I'm looking right here, and I see that the combat section, okay, it's longer than I thought. Okay, so that combat's probably going to be today's discussion. I have been working on doing some advertising for the cultists, and really, that's a lot of what I have going on today. Working on some advertising for the cultists. I still have to make the virtual tabletop. I'm hoping I'm going to be able to get to that today. Going to be working on getting the virtual tabletop ready, because I need that also to make how to play video and also so that we can play inside the coffee shop. So that's big stuff. Advertising and that's good. It's going to take a while to create that digital tabletop. So that's what I'm doing. So pressing along here. That's it's going well. There was something else. Oh yeah, and I was thinking about, I've got the cultist coffee. I got the cultist coffee mug this morning. And I'm unhappy with mugs. I was unhappy. I still have a few mugs left, but generally I was unhappy with the mugs because they're so fragile and they break when you ship. And there's actually some special like packaging that you can buy to ship mugs in, but that in itself is expensive. So the mugs are difficult because they break. I'm not going to do anything fragile ever again. They break in the mail, and then you have to reship, or you have to get special packaging and really package it well in order to make sure mugs get out. That's why I've largely been sending out the mugs myself now rather than having the warehouse do it, because I take the time to pack them. But I was kind of thinking, but is there something else we could put these logos on? And so I was looking at these double-walled tumblers, and I was seeing if they could be made up. And in fact, I just got a quote back from a company. It looks like they used the wrong logo. So I'm going to write them back too and see if we can get some kind of double wall insulated tumbler or something for morning sipping, because that wouldn't break. So that's what I'm thinking about. Let's see. I feel like I got started on the wrong foot this morning because my chair wasn't right. I was trying. My chair wasn't right. I was muted, everything. All right. See, good morning, Zero the Blade. Good morning. Let's see. Good morning, Sable. Let's go ahead and do a breathe and sip. Mike here has got his cup ready to go. Let's go ahead and do a breathe and zip and breathe and sip. Grab your cup. Let's take 2 deep breaths. Deep inhale, complete exhale, and then take a sip of our favorite beverage this morning. So here we go. Let's go. Let's breathe. And sip. All right. That sounds good. Oh, Mike says, by the way, you should get the package I sent tomorrow. Oh, thank you very much, Mike. Mike has sent us something for us to look at that has to do with our current analysis, or current analysis, but really the next thing we're going to be talking about directly. Good morning, James. Good morning. Good morning, Gamers Quest. All right. Everybody is here. All right. Let's bring this up. All right. So advanced hero quest, and we're looking at combat over here. So we were looking at, I was looking at the notes that we had from last time. We were looking at the dungeon generation, and not all that happy with the dungeon generation. And yep, that can probably say that's probably one of the reasons that it doesn't get out on the table very often. There are probably better ways to do that. I think that Warhammer Quest is going to do that better. And who knows, maybe we can even improve on it. But this is Advanced Hero Quest Combat. We need a really good combat system. So let's check out how they're going to do combat here. So combat begins on page 16. All right, here we go. Now, actually, I've always loved this picture. I think this is, I really like this picture, this illustration in here. It's a good-looking helmet. Good-looking helmet with the oculars and all of the mail draping down off the back of the head. I mean, he's having a bad day because this arrow is going through his head. But I like that illustration. Oh, that is it. That was a favorite commercial around our house. I was looking in the comments. All right, so combat turns. Okay, we do have the distinction between exploration turns and combat turns, which I really like. We talked about that last time. Combat turns. Combat turn starts whenever monsters are found in the dungeon and continue until either the monsters or the heroes have been killed, or the heroes have run far enough away so the monsters give up the chase. Normally, monsters are found when a new dungeon... Okay, so that is true. So, okay, it doesn't have to be... Is there a way to end combat turns? To end combat turns by running away. This is something also more about, like, are they hostile? Because there might be some ways to turn monsters not hostile. That doesn't involve killing them. So as long as they're hot, but they could still be hostile if you run away. Normally, monsters are found when a new dungeon is explored, but heroes may come across wandering monsters, and the GM can spring some nasty surprises. To decide whether you should be playing in combat turns or exploration turns, try to visualize what the monsters can see. If there aren't any monsters, then it definitely isn't a combat turn. Obviously, if they're in the same dungeon section as the heroes, they can see them and will attack. If the heroes are in an open doorway and the monsters are in the next section, the monsters can see the heroes. However, the heroes are still a little way down from the doorway. They're out of sight and could evade the monsters. Also, I was just thinking about sound. This is about line of sight, but Zombicide has rules for sound. Could you still be heard? Are you making noise? That could draw monsters. Basically, if the monsters can see the heroes, they attack. Of course, this is always the case when you first encounter them by opening the door. Monsters never retreat, although sentries may go for help, and character monsters can be removed by the GM. More on these later. If the heroes attempt to leave the dungeon section in which they have been fighting, the GM may decide to let the monsters pursue. Okay, so that's in the GM's hand. That's not the rules hands. Okay. That is also a pretty neat illustration. Placing monsters. Before the monsters are placed on the table, both the leader and the GM roll a die. Roll a dice. It does say dice again. Roll a dice. This is called a surprise roll. Some heroes are particularly fast-witted and keen-eyed, should be given a bonus to the hero's surprise roll. For instance, if an elf is looking into the room or passage where the monsters have been found, the leader adds +1 to the dice when he rolls for surprise. If the leader scores equal to or higher than the monsters have been surprised. If the leader places the monster in the dungeon section in which they were found, the leader places the monsters in the dungeon section in which they were found wherever he likes, but only one monster per square. The GM can now move each of these monsters 1 square. Now start the combat turn. If the GM scores higher, the monsters surprise the heroes. In this case, the GM places the monsters in the dungeon section where they were discovered, 1 monster per square, and the leader may move each 1 square. Play then proceeds to the GM phase of the first combat turn. In other words, okay, the play then proceeds to the GM phase of the first combat turn. In other words, the heroes missed their first turn. So because there's no map that tells you exactly where the monsters are standing, like in HeroQuest, you've got this mechanism. Man, maybe the problem is that maybe that was the issue. I had forgotten that I took my monitor with me when I went to play Nintendo with my nephews and my brother. We went to play Vexanadu, and my emulator is on my computer, and so I took my computer with me, and I wanted to be sure that we were able to play. We were able to hook it up to his television. It looked really nice, like playing Vexanadu on his big screen TV. That was really fun and really nice. But I took my monitor with me just in case we couldn't, the attachment was wrong or the cable was wrong or something. We had to use my monitor. And so that's why I just brought that back. So I think it was set up too high. That's why I looked like I was sitting in a hole. Let's see. Yes. Critical hit. So monsters. So this is the combination, though. This is the combination of the leader and the game master placing the monsters in order to figure out their positioning. So sentries. There's a special rule for a type of monster. These are called sentries. Sentries add +1 to the GM surprise roll. The dungeon section the sentry appears to always. The dungeon section the sentry appears in always contains a door, even if one was not rolled on the random door table, which may be placed by the GM. He can choose to have the sentry open this door instead of making an attack, provided the sentry is in an adjacent square. Sentries? So sentries go for help. Hey, good morning, PH. No, Lamentations has a similar one. Hey, Charlie, good morning. So the dungeon, if a sentry opens a door into an unexplored part of the dungeon, generate the new section at the end of the GM phase, using the same system as an exploration phase, and then continue with the next combat round. So this also, so what is this mechanic doing? This keeps the heroes from knowing how much of the dungeon is about to be revealed. Which is a problem. Like in HeroQuest, monsters can't open doors. So a monster can't go and let somebody know, hey, in the next room over, come and give us some help. And they're also not going to hear battle or something in a room. So this has an advantage. This is the mechanic that allows you to actually to have a monster go for help. So can you hear battle in the next room? like, if you're not being really sneaky, can you end up finding yourself fighting every one of the monsters in the dungeon? Well, realistically, you probably would, right? Okay, I'm going in there, and if we make a big noise, all of a sudden everything down there is going to be alerted to us. But on the other hand, opening up the entire dungeon in the beginning is probably not good from gameplay. Okay, distinguishing special. See, that's a lot of monsters in there. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. Distinguishing special monsters. If the monsters encountered include sentries or any other type of special monster that can appear, more on this later, you'll need to be able to tell which monster is which. The easiest way to do this is to use the appropriate Citadel miniatures for different monster types. Of Citadel miniatures now includes models suitable for every type of monster met in advanced HeroQuest. Mike says, from a game design standpoint, is noise something important from the game you're making? Well, I don't know. I was just thinking about this was based entirely off of line of sight, whether or not the monsters attack. I wonder if there's can be something about noise. Sometimes, I mean, noise is really important in Zombicide. That directs the monsters. If they're wandering around, they're drawn to noise, not just line of sight. So I don't know. Putting down noise tokens, sometimes that's my least favorite part of Zombicide, tracking all of the noise tokens. But other times it adds so much when you're trying to figure out which way the monsters are going to run, if you want to trace this group of people versus that group of people. On the other hand, it's there to add something. So I don't know. I just made note here that we're talking about what brings monsters to you, and how do you continue to know if you're still in combat turns? Just dashing around a corner doesn't really make sense. Okay, I went around the corner. Well, the monsters were probably going to follow you. Maybe if they can hear you. I don't know. I'm just thinking about it. Sable says, I really find mechanics for Fog of War in a tabletop game to be intriguing. I have a game called Scratch One Flat Top about the Battle of the Coral Sea that employs them. The Fog of War? I mean, that's present in, war games a lot. Fog of War in an adventure game like this? Is there one? Is that an adventure game? Scratch One Flat Top? Oh no, the Battle about the Coral Sea. Yeah. Okay, distinguish your monsters. Okay, that's a lot. Okay, it says, having nearly completed their quest, the heroes discover a group of Skaven, including a sentry behind a door. The leader and the GM each roll a die and add +1. The elf can see into the room, and there is a sentry present. The leader gets... Oh, just because the elf can see into the room. Looks like the warrior actually opened the door, though. The leader gets a 4 and the GM a 3, so the Skaven are surprised. The leader now chooses where each Skaven model is placed. Obviously, he'll be looking to set them in such a way that he gives the heroes an advantage. The GM may then move each Skaven model 1 square. A normal combat turn will now begin. Note the door on the far side. If the GM chooses to have the Skaven sentry open the door during the GM phase, whatever lies beyond must be generated at the end of the phase. If this is a lair or quest room with more Skaven, heavy reinforcements could soon be coming. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 Skaven. Oh, and it's telling you this is like initial position, and then I guess the arrows are where the game master is going to move them. So the heroes put them all on the other side of the room. But anyway, my point is that's a lot of Skaven, which is a different kind of thing I was noticing in these rule books than HeroQuest, because HeroQuest, you don't have that many monsters in any particular room. I mean, there's some of the final rooms with lots in there, but I mean, a lot of the times you're just fighting 1 or 2 or 3 or something like that, and so the monsters each feel significant. Now, whether or not they are significant, like there's a rules thing there, but they feel very significant. It's not just every room is not just some massive room full of monsters. I don't know if they're all like this or not. That was an issue that I had when we were playing Shadows of Brimstone, which I really liked. But that game was definitely tons of different monsters in the room. You open a door or whatever, and I feel like you'd take like a handful of miniatures and just like fill all of the squares inside the room with a bunch of bad guys. And then you'd have to, cut through them or do something with them. So that game had tons and tons of monsters in each room, but I want to fewer monsters, unless there's something that are supposed to be, just have tons of them in there, like giant rats or something like that. But fewer monsters, generally speaking. But more significant. That way we don't have the, we got to dump an entire box full of miniatures into every room. Yeah, it sounded like when you say Coral Sea, so that is World War II. Yeah, how would we do Fog of War? I'm going to make note of that. Fog of War. PH says, by adding these mechanics as events in specific places or as challenges against certain opponents, you would still get some immersion and mechanical simulation, but it would keep things simpler. Like sound tracking. He's talking about sound tracking. By adding these mechanics as events, and that's, if you do something that makes a lot of noise, it tells you, like, if in order to do this thing, you make a lot of noise. And so that brings the monsters from the surrounding rooms or something. And that way you're not having to, every time you cast this particular spell, or whatever, oh, that's a noisy spell. Remember to drop noise tokens. Okay, sequence of play. Just like an exploration turn, a combat turn is played as a sequence of phases, and you must complete each one before going on to the next. The hero player phase. Each hero player has several options during the hero player phase. The hero player decides amongst themselves who moves first. If they can't decide, the leader decides for them. Any of the actions listed below can be performed by heroes or by henchmen. A model can move and then attack, or it can attack and then move. If a hero has several henchmen, they don't all have to follow the same sequence. Some can attack first while others move first. A model may run instead of making an attack. This is explained later. We're talking about move and action and then move. So in combat, we can't like search. Okay, so we can fight, we can run, or a model that's beside a door may open or close it instead of making an attack. This can either be done before or after moving, but not in the middle of a move. If the door leads into an unexplored part of the dungeon, the new dungeon section must be generated as if this were an exploration turn. This is done at the end of the hero phase after the hero players have moved their models. So players can decide to dive through new doors as well. This means that a model can't move through a door and that opens into an unexplored section of the dungeon in the same phase as the door is opened, even if it is opened before moving. The same goes for models moving off junctions into unexplored areas. So here we are just fighting or running. Make combat choices simple. For fast play. I was talking to my brother about this after we were playing yesterday, because he and I designed a couple of games together. I don't want this to be too complicated. You're like, okay, now what do I do? In fact, I had even thought about game timer for player turns. A game timer for player turns. To keep combat moving. Maybe not necessary. But if you want to have time to think about what you're doing and talk to each other, well, that's in an exploration turn. Once some monster leaps out and starts to try to put a cleaver in your friend's head, now is not the time to, search through your spell book, do a whole bunch of reading, ask everybody else, now, what is it that you want to do? What is it you want to do? Or what should I do? Do you want me to do this? Do you want me to cast this spell? That's not the time. The time is to take action and try to do some combat. Good morning, Robert. Mike says the leader, once again, is doing a lot of heavy lifting in the rules. So, yeah, now the leader is rotating. The leader helps set up the character, the enemy models inside, and then also it breaks ties among heroes if nobody can decide how to go. Yeah, PH says, yeah, maybe like a botched roll or an event card of noise that can be mitigated by whatever roll. Like dungeon event, you drop a skeleton into a well. And that makes enough noise to summon all the orcs and the Balrog. So then the Game Master phase. The GM has a similar range of options during his phase. The GM decides if his monsters are going to move and attack or attack and then move. Whichever he chooses, all monsters must follow the same routine. Oh, all monsters must follow the same routine. Each monster's action must be completed before the GM starts to move and attack with the next monster. A monster may run instead of making an attack. This is explained later. Sentries may open doors instead of making attacks. This can be done either before or after moving, but not in the middle of a move. If the door leads into an unexplored part of the dungeon, the new dungeon sections must be generated as if it was explored. This were an exploration turn. This is done at the end of the GM phase after all the monsters have moved. This means that a monster can't move through a door into an unexplored dungeon of the same phase as the door is opened, even if it is opened before the model moves. So same kind of rule as for the heroes. The same goes for a monster moving off of junctions into unexplored areas. If the monsters are able to pursue, explained later, they may open a door instead of making an attack. If any special monsters, such as sorcerers or champions, fulfill their particular role during this phase, the GM must reveal to the hero player what type of monster they are. If a champion attacks or a wizard casts a spell or a sentry opens a door, the GM reveals the model's identity. It should, of course, be a distinctive model or have an identifiable color base. End phase. This phase only takes place if no monsters are left in play or the heroes escape. Heroes are considered to have escaped if there are no monsters within sight at the end of the GM phase. So this is based on sight. Heroes are considered to have escaped if there are no monsters within sight at the end of the GM phase. The only exception is if this was solely achieved by closing a door, in which case the next turn is also played as a combat turn. If there are still no monsters in sight, so you can't just shut a door and end up and end combat. The monsters are too smart for that in this game. I still feel like I'm sitting really low here on the camera. Mike says, what if all monsters cannot move and attack? Can those monsters that cannot do this just move? The example set up in the book looks like not every monster could attack. You're right. So it doesn't actually say. It wasn't explicit in saying that you don't have to do one of those. Does it? Not in what we read. I would have assumed that both of those are optional, as with heroes. You don't have to do it. But you're right. It doesn't explicitly say that. Okay, if the only exception is this was achieved by closing a door, in which the case the next turn is also played as a combat turn. If there are still no monsters in sight at the end of the next phase, the heroes have escaped. If the heroes kill all the monsters, they may loot the bodies. The table shown below shows how many gold crowns the heroes find. If any of the monsters carried a magical item, as, for example, many monsters do, they may also be taken. The GM must reveal what it is. If the heroes escape before killing the monsters, they don't get to loot any of the bodies. Even if they later return to the place they fight, they find the dead monsters and their weapons have already been removed. Finally, the hero players elect a new leader using the same procedure as the start of the game. This keeps the job rotating around the players. Now, play now resumes with an exploration turn. Okay, we do have looting bodies. Dragon Strike has looting bodies. Or searching for treasure on bodies. You know, HeroQuest, in classic HeroQuest, you don't search individual monsters. Like, monsters aren't searched. It's the rooms that search. So rooms versus monster bodies. What do you think about that? What are you trying to search in a game like this? With the thing I don't like about the searching the bodies in Dragon Strike is that you're supposed to tip the monster miniatures over and leave them laying on the board until such time as the players choose to search that body, in which case you remove it after it's searched. The problem with that, I think, is having something sitting there on the board. I mean, inevitably, someone wants to like stand in the square where you kill a monster because there's a fight going on. And it doesn't say that you can't do that, but as far as physical representation on the game board, having a bunch of miniatures that are turned over just interrupts the physical play of the game, and I don't like that. That's my biggest complaint there. And also, actually, that game, sometimes if the players aren't searching, then you may run out of monster miniatures because you got some of them that are turned over and, you know, on the table and dead. I suppose if you were to have some type of flat dead monster token, that would help. That would help. You could use some kind of dead monster token to let people know there was, you know, whatever type of monster that was that's laying there dead. That way it wouldn't interfere with the with your movement and the use of that square. But it's another thing to keep up with. Just searching the room seems enough. PH says the combat is not the time to flip through your spell book, nor to ask each other what the other one wants to do. It's great. It is a great advice even for RPGs. I agree. Robert says, why not just put the pieces to the side? The pieces aren't put to the side because the location of that square where they died still matters, because the hero has to be adjacent to that monster in order to search for them. So you're still supposed to be keeping track of where that dead body is, because you've got to get adjacent to it. Yeah, I agree. If you want to think about, okay, now do something else, that should be done at a different time. You should have a few options to choose as forms of action reactions should be kind of pre-programmed as you were trained to react. And if you want to talk about doing something else with your heroes, do that in an exploration turn. Hey, next time we're going to do X, Y, Z, whatever. But this time, I think that's important, because one way to do this is like the 5th edition way to do it. The 5th edition way to do it would be like, okay, you've got all these options and combat options when your time comes up. You've got all these kind of things you can possibly do. I mean, it can take a long time to get around the table with a turn as far as 5th edition goes, I've noticed. But that way, it's a self-reinforcing cycle that if you're like, okay, this takes a while to get around the table, so I want to be sure that when it comes to you, you've got really cool stuff to do. But on the other hand, if you give everybody really complicated, cool stuff to do, you're only making it take longer to get around the table. I'd rather in a combat environment have less options to play it out more quickly than going the 5th edition route. Mike says, does time matter in the game such that searching bodies has a cost? Yes. In Dragon Strike, yes. Because in Dragon Strike, every game has the counter. The time cost is the number of turns until the dragon arrives. And so it's going down. Every turn, the counter is going down. Every different game has the dragon counter start on a different number. So time, they did put time into Dragon Strike by having the dragon counter. So if the heroes spend a lot of time searching for treasure, then they're going to end up with a monster sooner. So that's one reason why sometimes the heroes don't go back and search monsters, even though there might be treasure and treasure cards on the monsters. And all in Dragon Strike, the searching, you can step in a pit, but searching itself, the searching itself can never be bad for you. The searches are always an immediately usable item that upgrades you right there. But you got to spend time in order to search. It's a simple mechanic with the dragon countdown timer, but that's why heroes probably don't go back and search everything, or may not be going back to search everything. I've noticed that in games I've played with the nephews. Movement in combat terms. The GM, maybe this is where it says it, Mike. The GM decides in what order the monsters move. If the hero players decide amongst themselves in what order they move, if they cannot agree, the leader decides for them. A monster hero can be moved forwards, backwards, left, or right, any number of squares equal to its speed. So we do have a different combat speed. We have exploration speed, which was 12, versus combat speed. So they're not penalizing the dwarf here during exploration, but that could matter in the combat phase. A monster hero, okay, so attacks, monsters may not move diagonally through any model, through an impassable obstacle such as a wall or closed door. If a model is moved into a death zone, see below, it finishes moving at once. Attacks may only be made on opponents in vertically or horizontally adjacent spaces. A model may be turned to face any direction, so it doesn't matter if an opponent is moving in front or behind the model. So there's no flanking here. The model can still turn to face it and make an attack. Attacks are not made diagonally unless the attacker has a long-reach weapon, such as a spear. The rules for making an attack are found in hand-to-hand combat section. So we do want differences in weapons. That's one thing I liked about some of the cards that we got here. Was it Axiom Quest? It may have been Axiom Quest that had the different in different rules for weapons. I think that's a way, or more variety. I think that's a way to distinguish otherwise similar heroes. Because I was talking about what type of people are going into a dungeon anyway. And if they're like the special forces, well, that means a lot of them are going to, be similar kinds of heroes. Like a knight. Let's say a knight. Let's say you're doing one in Rabavania. Because only one player get to be the knight, and then if you got to have a knight, a druid, a damsel, and a yeoman or something, if you've got to have that, what if more than one person wants to be a knight? Seems like more than one knight should be able to go into the dungeon and be part of the party. Well, how do you distinguish different knights from each other? Well, one way could be the weapons they use. Okay, we're both knights, so we have similar stats over here, but you're going to be the sword and shield knight, and I'm going to be the axe knight. Okay, I'm thinking that's a way to distinguish people. Oh, Mike asked, did my brother have any wisdom about the game design? Yeah, I mentioned, I was talking to him about it. Yeah, he didn't. I was basically just explaining some of the ideas that we've been talking about on the morning grind. He and I have done a couple of games together, and he mentioned he said, well, I might like to do another game. So it would be neat to have him in action with game design again. It's been a while since he's had anything to do with the tabletop gaming space. He said, "Okay, it seems like you've thought about this a lot." Because I mean, we wouldn't be sitting down, or because I'm not sitting down from scratch going, "All right, well, what type of game would I like to create?" At one time, I was thinking about some kind of warband game, but obviously we've gone in this direction, so it would have to be for that. He's like, "I'm the guy who can tell you if something is too complicated." No, you're going too far. So I was just telling him some of my ideas. I know that he wants movement to be a big he wants to design a game. He was working on some rules a little while back ago, a couple of years ago, where movement and manipulating the places of the in like a war game situation, instead of just using like a war band game kind of situation, instead of like the consequences of attacks are always just, okay, you lose some kind of hit point or something, that you could actually be pushing, forcing the opponent into other squares, like, retreating from you, I was thinking, or using some kind of spell to manipulate their position. Which I was thinking a little bit about too in here. In GURPS, you can gain a defensive advantage if you're willing to back up and give ground. And I was thinking about that. Now, I don't want there to be too many choices. You're always having to act and react and things like that. But if positioning is important, which it kind of sounds like it is, or could be, then, okay, I'm going to take an advantage on my defense here, but I'm giving ground, which may not be something that you always want to do, especially if you've got to protect some other player or something. Your position may be important. If it's not important, then it can't be in there. Where you're standing, if where you're standing doesn't really matter, then it's not a sacrifice to give it up. I'm talking about in general in the game, in the general gameplay. In any particular situation, it might not matter. Hey, I do have strategic depth. I can back up. I don't know this reference. PH says, a group should create cool things together. Simple action, individual actions could have permutations that lead to more complex combos. Oh, it's like Captain Planet. One player sets something up, simple action, and then ends up in that's an interesting idea. Combinations of simple actions. So death zone. So there is zone of control. Death zone, I forgot about this, would be what I would call a zone of control, or is called zone of control in a lot of different games, especially war games. Each model exerts a death zone into any square it can attack, the area that a combatant can threaten with hand-to-hand weapon. Any model moving into an opposing creature's death zone stops moving there. You cannot continue to move a model after it has entered an enemy death zone. However, you may move out of a death zone at the beginning of its turn. Certain long-reach weapons, such as spears, halberds, and two-handed swords, allow combatants to attack diagonally. Any model equipped with such a weapon still exerts a death zone on all diagonal squares around it, as well as the ones vertically and horizontally adjacent. A model's death zone is immediately focused where an opponent enters it. This means that the death zone is now concentrated onto the first square the opponent occupies, and all other squares around the model can now be moved through as normal. See, this sounds important. So it's a zone of control, but you're not constantly occupying it. So that does matter who's going first, where they move. This doesn't mean the model has to attack an opponent in the focus square, or if other opponents move into adjacent squares, the model can choose which it attacks. A model in an opponent's death zone cannot open or close doors or open treasure chests. Being in an opponent's death zone also stops a wizard from casting certain spells, such as Flame of the Phoenix, which is explained in relevant spell descriptions. So zone of control. I do like zone of control, especially if positioning on the battlefield is important. A model in an opponent's death zone cannot open or, okay, we just said that. Also, stop certain types of interaction. So, for example, Terralion exerts a death zone on all shaded spaces. However, if a Skaven is moved into space A, all the remaining death zone squares are ignored by other Skaven. Note, too, that if the Skaven moves from A to B next turn, it would have to halt movement there and remains the focus of Terralion's death zone until it leaves the zone altogether. If Terralion is later equipped with a long-reach weapon, such as a two-handed sword, he exerts a death zone into the diagonal spaces around him. Oh, I have not heard about this at all. It's about a cop riding a battle axe with a cop riding a T-Rex with a battle axe. Ha! Oh, PH says, kind of like Captain Planet. I use that in my own system. We join simple actions together as a domino game. The sequence of actions linked together have a greater effect than their individual parts. Let me think more about that. Doors. Heroes, henchmen, and sentries as above may open or close a door instead of making an attack, providing the model is beside the door at the time. A model may open or close a door before or after moving, according to the order originally chosen for the movement and attack. The opening and closing of a door replaces the attack. If a door is opened into an unexplored section of a dungeon during the combat turn, how many times have we read that? Okay. You'll reveal more dungeon running. A model can run instead of making an attack. First, as usual, the model is moved as many squares as its speed characteristic. Then the player rolls a die. If he rolls 2 to 12, the model may move up to that many extra squares. If he rolls a 1, however, the model stumbles and cannot move any extra squares. If a model that runs cannot open or close any doors. So it's not just doubling it. It's not doubling your speed characteristic. You're getting some unknown number of squares if you decide to run. I guess that keeps things from being quite as predictable. Pursuit. If the heroes attempt to escape from an encounter, the GM may choose to have the monsters pursue them. The monster that pursues must run unless it can end its normal move next to an opponent and attack. I guess that's also if you're running away. If you choose to run away, in this game, you're trying to get out of line of sight of the monsters. So you might not make it if you're actually if you're running away and actually using the run mechanic here. Pursuit. If the heroes attempt to escape from an encounter, the GM may choose to have monsters pursue them. A monster that pursues must run unless it can end its normal move next to an opponent and attack. A monster that is in pursuit may open a door instead of making an attack. Pursuit ends if all the monsters are able to make a normal move and attack, in which case the next turn is a normal combat turn, or if the heroes escape, in which case the next turn is an exploration turn. If the heroes escape, they are out of sight of any monsters at the end of the game phase, unless it was done by closing a door. If the heroes escape, the monsters return to the place they came from. This should be recorded on the map, along with the number that are left. The heroes return during the expedition, they face the remaining monsters. If they return during a later expedition, the monsters have been restocked and the original number are present. Okay, that was a lot. Now I think we're actually talking about rolling for combat. Yeah, more work for the mapper job. I was thinking, can't you just what would be the problem with just putting the models back in the room? I was thinking about that the other day when I started talking to Seth about it. Why can't the mapper or just everybody have some type of token or something they're using, like we were using the 9mm rounds for the morning grind or for dinner and a board game, to indicate something like which wall has been searched or which wall has not been searched? Why can't you just put that on the table? Like I said, because it's not like these tiles are being picked up. It seems we haven't read anything about picking up the tiles. So the tiles are sitting there right there on the board. If something hasn't been searched, why doesn't it have some kind of token or something? That way, everybody could take care of that, and you're not having to redraw the map on redraw the dungeon on your map and record all of this stuff. I guess it would matter if there are multiple expeditions. If you want to recreate the same map, you would have it mapped. Now, today, I think you would just take a picture of it with your phone. That way, if you need to recreate that map for some reason. But why are we doing this instead of having some type of token that represents it physically on the board? That way, everybody could also see it, and you're not having to ask the mapper, okay, now which wall has not been searched for secret doors? You would just see it. Okay, hand-to-hand combat. A model may only make a hand-to-hand attack when it's adjacent to an enemy model. For instance, the target is in the attacker's death zone. Hand-to-hand attacks are the only type of attack that can be made when a model is adjacent to an enemy. Right, that's tokens help to a point, but too many become confusion. Now, there would probably be a lot of tokens on this board. I mean, there probably would be. Maybe that's one reason. I mean, it seems like they could have added more to the box, but there would be a lot of tokens on the board, I think. I still think it sounds preferable. Attacks may not be made diagonally unless the model is equipped with a long-reach weapon. If the model is in contact with more than one enemy, the controlling player decides which one to attack before rolling any dice. The attack consists of 1 or 2 dice rolls. First, we are making a to-hit roll to see if the blow lands. If this hits, the attacker rolls for wounds to see what damage it causes. Okay, when a model makes an attack, look up the weapon skill of its target in the hand-to-hand combat section of the attacker's character sheet or the monster reference table. In the row underneath it, the weapon skill is the number the attacker must roll to hit. Roll a dice again. Roll a die. The score is higher. If the score is higher than or equal to the required to hit roll, the attack is successful and the monster scores a hit. So that's weapon skill versus weapon skill. If the hit rolls a 12, the attack is called a critical hit. This allows the attacker to make a free attack. Some large weapons, like the halberd or double-handed weapons, can cause a critical hit on a roll of 11 or 12. The weapons section of the attacker's character sheet or monster reference table gives the number needed for the critical. So a critical hit is attack again. Now, we do have fumbles. So fumbles. On the other hand, if the hit roll is a 1, the attack is fumbled. This means the model makes such a hash of the attack, his opponent is presented with a golden opportunity to crack him over the head instead. The model being attacked makes an immediate free attack on the attacker. Okay, I was wondering how we were going to handle this. So in both cases, they're an additional attack. Just as larger weapons cause critical hits more often, so too do they cause more fumbles. Although they're heavier and batter easily through armor, they're also clumsier to use. These weapons cause a fumble to hit on a roll of a 1 or 2. The weapons section of the attacker's character sheet or monster sheet reference table gives the number needed for a fumble. And of course, this is using D12. We're saying this is it was kind of disappointing after having the custom dice for the original HeroQuest to be using just a standard D12 in this. That was disappointing. I would have thought that we would have gotten more advanced custom dice, but we didn't. But because it's a D12, we can do things like the hit, a critical hit on a 12 or a fumble on a 1, and not a 1 or a 6 on a 6-sided die. It got me saying that. Free attacks are bought about, but so you are risking yourself. You could be risking yourself when you make an attack. So you could get damaged on your turn. You can't do that in HeroQuest. Making an attack is always something that can only go well for you, which is why even if you're going to run away, go ahead and attack the monster first and then run. At least there is a reason to not do that here, because if I roll low and I fumble, it's not guaranteed I'm going to get hit, but the monster is going to be able to make a free attack on me. Oh, we were supposed to make a note here. There was randomness in running. Fumbles and critical hits are free attacks. Now, I thought about that too, that you could, what if you could risk, you were risking yourself on an attack if the opponent is especially powerful? I was thinking about that being something that had to do with um, like what would the equivalent of weapon skills would be. Oh, the opponent is really skilled. If I run up to make an attack, then it's possible that that he's so good in his defense that he just takes my head off or something. This is random. Both critical hits and fumbles are random. So if the attack hits, roll again to see what damage is caused. The number of damage dice depend on the weapon being used. In the weapons section, the attacker's character sheet or monster reference table gives this figure. Roll the right number of dice and compare each to the toughness of the target. The target will suffer 1 wound for each die that scores a number equal to or greater than its toughness. Ah, okay. So I was wondering, like, what are we going to roll, like damage D12 or D12 wounds? No, we're talking about exceeding toughness. So you can connect with your target, but not exceed their toughness. Weapon skill is only, like in Warhammer a lot, weapon skill is only about making the hit connecting. There's the next step, which is how tough are they, whether that's armor or natural armor, which is something in general that I like. But this is requiring 2 rolls instead of 1. So this is not, so there's not a defense roll. So this is not active defense. It's passive defense unless the opponent rolls a fumble, and then the defender would get to fight back. But still, that's not exactly the same. Active defense here. Maybe opposed hand-to-hand combat rolls, winner hits the other. Well, you could do that. You could do that. I try to condense it to 1 roll. Even though I really like active defense. But this still so this requires 2 rolls. It's passive defense, attack, and then number of wounds. A die that rolls 12 causes critical damage, which means it causes a wound and it may be rolled again. Okay, so we also have something like exploding wounds here. We've got a separate damage roll. Not a huge likelihood, because it's 1 in 12. But I guess it could happen. A die that rolls a 12 causes critical damage, which means it causes a wound and may be rolled again. And again if another 12 is rolled. Each player keeps track of the number of its wounds his monster has suffered. Hey, what about strength? So we're not comparing strength to toughness. This just says the target will suffer 1 wound for each die that the score that is equal to or greater than its toughness. We're not comparing a strength score to toughness. I don't remember seeing a strength score. Was there a strength score? Classic Warhammer would have you comparing strength to toughness. But you don't do that here. Each player keeps track of the number of wounds his model has suffered. Hero players keep track of their characters on their character sheets. The GM should use wound counters, placing these beside the monster as they are wounded until they have been killed. Alternatively, the GM can keep track of all monster wounds on a scrap of paper. So here we go with an example right here. On encountering the band of Skaven in the room, the heroes prepare for combat. In the first hero player phase, Heinrich and Sven move and attack. Torellian and Magnus attack and move. The hero players briefly discuss who will do what, but the leader eventually sorts things out. Torellian's archery and the arcane magic of Magnus are covered in later sections. The effect is that the 5 of the Skaven are taken out of the fight. Heinrich and Sven move as indicated, halting in the death zones the Skaven they have chosen to attack. So I guess Heinrich and Magnus took out some with bowfire and magic. The GM announces the Skaven's weapon skill. Both targets have a weapon skill of 6. Heinrich's player checks his character sheet, which shows that he needs a 5 or better to hit an opponent with a weapon skill of 6. Sven has the same chance to hit. The two players roll. Heinrich gets a 4 and misses, but Sven gets a 12. This is a critical hit, and he gains a free attack and rolls a 9. The Dwarven hero has hit his target twice. He now checks the damage dice for the axe he carries. He is entitled to roll 5 dice for each hit. The dice roll needs, but this only came with 1 die, didn't it? Only came with 1 d12. Did it come with 2 d12s? Like you potentially need a whole bunch here. Each hit needs to beat the Skaven's toughness of 6 to score a wound. He rolls 2, 10, 11, 12, 1, 5, 6, 5, 3, and 8. A total of 5 wounds, more than enough to kill the Skaven who started with 3. Note the critical damage roll has no effect because the target has already been killed. That's not bad. I wonder why they decided to skip the comparison of strength with toughness. Too much? They finally decided we come to a point where this is too much. Roll against a static toughness score rather than something that is modified by the strength. Ranged attacks, I believe this is going to be similar. Bows, crossbows, and thrown weapons. To make a ranged attack, a model must qualify through these 5 rules. A model must be carrying a ranged weapon, must not be adjacent to its monster, the model must not be in a square adjacent to its target. The model must not be in an enemy death zone. The target must be within range of the model's weapon. Range is counted as the number of squares from the attacking model, not counting the square it's on, to the target, counting the target square. Do not count diagonally. The maximum number of range of the weapon is given on the model's character sheet or the model reference sheet. The model must have a line of sight to the target. Characters may only move and make ranged attacks with thrown weapons. You can only attack with a bow or crossbow if you don't move. Calculating line of sight. Sable says this is basically a skirmish game. I'm getting a lot of similarity to Mage Knight, in fact. I haven't ever played Mage Knight. But this is played on a grid, so Mage Knight is not, Mage Knight's not on a grid. I think its combat system is all right. Roll to hit and then multiple wounds potentially exploding. Okay, so but you got to calculate line of sight. I think so too, Mike. Designing a skirmish war game would be interesting. I think so too. That's on the long list. Everything takes forever. That's the long list. But if I could only ever do one game, I suppose it would be one more game. I think it would be an adventure game. Maybe the same kind of rules could be modified for a skirmish game. So you got to calculate line of sight. Individual players will always be the best judge of whether an attacker has line of sight. It actually says it's normally a matter of common sense. Obviously, all walls block line of sight, and so do doors. To allow for gray areas, you can also judge line of sight to be partially obscured. Be guided by the principle that if it's hard to judge whether the attacker has a clear line of sight, then he probably doesn't and should have a reduced chance of getting hit. When firing a partially obscured target, treat the range as if it were 4 squares greater than it actually is. Okay, so partially. Do I have line of sight? Yes or no? Maybe not. Maybe it's a gray. Maybe I'm fighting at an obscured target. And when there is disagreement, be sensible about the outcome. It isn't worth spoiling a game over disagreement about what can see what. A single arrow never changed the course of anything. In this example, we've got 3 positions, A, B, or C. Assume Torellian is in one of 3 positions, A, B, or C. Oh, A, B, or C, right down here. I see. From position A, although he's behind the door, Torellian is in the adjacent square next to the opening and thus can fire through it. By the same token, the Skaven won't be able to shoot, would be able to shoot him. However, it's fair to say that Skaven 2 and 3 are at least partially obscured. Skaven 2 by the wall and Skaven 3 by 1. So that's obscuring by other models. From position B, Torellian would have a clear shot at Skaven's 2 and 3. Heinrich doesn't block the shot at 2 because he's in the adjacent square to Torellian. Okay, so we have added partial obscurement. Okay, one more page. We'll go through this page. Hit rolls and wounds. Ranged attacks are resolved in a similar way to hand-to-hand attacks. First, a hit roll is made, and then the attack hits, the wound roll is made. Count the distance in squares to the target, excluding the square the attacker is on, but counting the targets. Do not count diagonally. Look up the total on the ranged combat section of the attacker's character sheet and monster reference table to find the score needed to hit. The target's weapon skill has no effect on an attack from a ranged weapon. If a hit is scored, resolve the damage in the same way as for a hand-to-hand attack. Recovering missiles, daggers, and throwing axes may only be thrown once. Each shot from a bow uses up 1 arrow, and the archer should keep track of the arrows he has used. Ranged attacks. Let's see, recovering. See, we need a better rule for that, which we've talked about. There was somebody who did, was that the Angry Game Master, I think, had a better way to handle that. Because I guess that's classic HeroQuest, though, that your dagger can only be thrown once, but you can't go get your dagger back. If you run away, you wouldn't have it. Each shot from a bow uses up 1 arrow, so you are tracking arrows. Ranged weapons may be recovered once combat is over. Oh, okay, this does say the next thing, ranged weapons may be recovered once the combat is over and all the monsters have been killed, but not if the heroes escape. Okay, I'm with you. Roll a die for each arrow, dagger, or throwing axe used. Arrows can be recovered intact on a roll of 10 or more. The weapons on a roll of 7 or more. So you do have to roll to see if you get your ammunition back. It's additional rolling. Is that worth it? You got to keep track of how many arrows you've shot. All right, now I'm going to pull my arrows back out of these orcs. Arrows can be recovered intact on a roll of 10 or more. Critical hits and fumbles on rolls of 12 and 1 respectively, just as with hand-to-hand attacks. Critical hits with a ranged weapon are assumed to have found a chink in the target's armor or hit a vital spot. The target's toughness is halved when rolling for damage. Oh, so the critical hits are different with ranged weapons. Have toughness rounded down when rolling for damage. A fumble causes the attack to hit an ally instead of the target. Whoa, so 1 in 12, you're going to hit an ally. If there's a friendly model within 2 squares of the target, it will have been struck instead. The player controlling the original target chooses which, if more than 1 is available. Oh, you get to decide where you're deflecting it. The target does. If there are no friendly models, the missile just misses. Yeah, whatever that percentage is, you could just say, yeah, you get one quarter or 1/2 of your ammunition back. You still have to track all of that. But that would prevent the rolling. I think you do need to track ammunition. Because the advantage is when you're shooting a missile weapon is that you don't have to be next to something that's trying to kill you. But that should come at the cost of, well, an actual cost to buy arrows and a limited number of times to do that. Hey, Michael. Yeah, we're actually getting close to wrapping up. We got fate points and death here. So fate points change things which could have just happened, incidents on that turn. For example, if a model's hit by an attack, he could spend a fate point after he found out the number of wounds he has suffered and thus negate all the damage. A model may not spend a fate point to change something that happened in a previous turn. Although fate points can be used during exploration turns, they are most commonly used in combat. Each hero starts the game with a number of fate points. A hero may spend any number of fate points in the same combat turn. Fate point doesn't tell me how. Fate points cannot be lent to other heroes or to henchmen. Fate points can be spent to negate, i.e. reduce to 0, any and all damage a hero suffered in a turn. This is the single most important function of fate points and can be used in any circumstance. If they can be used to negate the damage from attack, a damage from a trap, or whatever. Fate points can also be spent to convert a failed dice roll into a successful dice roll. Again, this ability can be used under any circumstances. It could be used to convert a missed attack into a hit, a failed intelligence test into a successful one, and so on. Gaining more fate points are covered in the Between Expeditions section. A player should be careful that he doesn't waste his fate points. Once they have been used, a hero is vulnerable and could die at any time. So death. It happens to all in the end and to monsters more often than not. A monster henchman is killed when its wound score is reduced to 0 or below. Remove the model from the table. Its slayer may be moved into the vacated square if the player so wishes. Oh, you take over the square. It's interesting. Heroes are merely knocked out, KO'd, if their wound score is reduced to 0, and die only when it falls lower than this. Place the model on its side when it's KO'd. A hero may do nothing while in this condition and counts as having a weapon skill of 1 if attacked. Another hero can drag the victim 3 squares instead of making a normal move, provided he starts his move in an adjacent square. A KO'd hero could be given a potion of healing by another hero or henchman in an adjacent square who has one. As long as neither character is in the opponent's death zone, a KO'd hero can also be restored to action by a healing spell. A KO'd hero may be carried by a comrade during exploration turns. However, the KO'd hero whoever carries him may move only up to 6 squares. I don't think this is a bad system as far as the combat goes. Like it suffers from having come on the heels of this complex dungeon generation. But if you weren't doing that and you were just playing HeroQuest with that kind of combat, how would you feel? You don't get to roll the cool dice. I would probably try it. Let's see. What do we say here with our notes here? Okay, combat turns. Different ways that combat turns can end. Doesn't have to end with just their death. It can end by running away, or in some other way turning the bad guys non-hostile. We got a discussion of sound here. We noted there is a mechanic for monsters bringing in help that keeps the heroes on their toes from not knowing exactly how much the dungeon is going to be revealed. But on the other hand, it's not some potentially infinite regression where you're going to get all of the dungeon at once. My preference is for fewer monsters to be in rooms, but have each one more significant. I haven't played this one yet, but the pictures tend to suggest there are a lot of bad guys in the room. I mean, maybe that plays just fine, particularly in the context of this game, but that was a critique of Shadows of Brimstone. I don't want to just dump. Here are all the models. Dump a whole bunch of them in the room. We talked about, could you use some kind of fog of war mechanic? We talked a lot about simplifying combat mechanics. Like, there isn't a whole lot to do on the combat turn, so there's probably wizard spell casting, which we're going to come to on Sunday. But we want to simplify choices in combat. The more complicated choices can come when you don't have an orc trying to put a cleaver through your head. Had a discussion about looting bodies. I don't like that from the physicality of having to leave them on the table. That's a negative to me. I mean, it makes sense that some monster that's the monster that has the magic sword or some type of item. But if you're talking about the physical environment, no miniature works well laying on its side for the most part. And having to leave all the monsters, especially if there are a lot of monsters, on the table dead, it doesn't work as far as gameplay goes. There's a difference between exploration speed and combat speed. That makes sense. Combat speed is smaller. Everybody's got combat speed. Zone of control and positioning is important. There was randomness in the running. Can you get away? So, like, there is that. So that's why, like, the classic HeroQuest doesn't have static move scores. Because there is some randomness when you're rolling the 2d6. Some people might say too much randomness, but the monsters have static movement. But if you're trying to run away from them, you're not guaranteed to be able to do that. That's the same case here. So, yeah, with running speeds as completely known quantities, somebody is just never going to be able to catch up to somebody. But especially and maybe that works if you're just on a flat field, running down the high school gym floor or something. But if you're in the middle of a dungeon things to trip on, things to get over. You may not be able to run optimally. So having some kind of randomness in the run kind of makes sense. So we do have fumbles and critical hits, both of which are used differently in hand-to-hand combat versus missile weapons. Critical hits basically get you another roll. In hand-to-hand combat, they half the target's toughness in the missiles. And then you do have potentially exploding dice damage on wounds, but not to a huge effect. Not to a huge effect. Huh. All right. So Mike says, okay, the system for combat is fine, worth trying out. Yeah, see, can we do this without fate points? I mean, I would kind of prefer to not have them. I like fate points in Fate because of how you get them, and you're driving the narrative with them. But in general, it seems like if you can design a game without this kind of meta currency, maybe you should. And again, I haven't played this. Yeah, I mean, okay, so he's mainly talking about board games, but I mean, RPGs, but it could be, I mean, I think it's the same thing. Like, can you do this without having a mechanic like this? Monsters running away. What about monsters running away? Yeah, that's true. What about the monsters running away? What if the monsters run away? You got to figure out what to do with them, especially if you're in a GM-less environment, if you're in a fully cooperative environment. What if a monster runs away? Ending combat. Yeah, combat should be quick and tactical and keep everyone engaged. That's the goal. Oh, yeah, lying prone. The only miniatures that work laying down are the tiny soldiers holding their miniature rifles in a prone position. That works. Bacon says, there's way more meat on the bone here than in HeroQuest, but like way more than I expected. Yes, it's quite a jump. And we mentioned that I haven't gotten my HeroQuest players like in the family to ever play this. They've never made that jump. I wonder if the plan here was to funnel players into Warhammer. But remember, we did find out that the Warhammer Fantasy role-playing had already been created, because this is a huge step up. There is a whole lot more here. But Warhammer, I thought that this was created and then this spun off into the fantasy role-playing. And then they backed off of them out of crunch in Warhammer Quest. So this game is in a weird position, but it's also strange. I as far as I didn't know, that Warhammer, the whole complete Warhammer role-playing game had already been created. So this is kind of like putting the role-playing game in the box we came up with. It does feel like Warhammer Fantasy... Warhammer Fantasy role-playing on a grid. Yeah. Advanced HeroQuest is a brutal game with frequent total party kills, GamerQuest says. I imagine the fate points are a teeny attempt at balancing it to add a little bit toward the heroes. Yeah. Hey, Tomocrat. So how do you adjust that? So I'm okay with a brutal game. Okay, let's have a brutal game. I kind of want the game to be brutal. But can we adjust the brutality so we don't have to effectively give everybody a bunch of do-overs? I don't know how many of those things you start with. We never found the just basic character sheets. Monster reference table here. Never found the character sheets. They're probably in here somewhere. But anyway. Gamer's Quest says, I think that all of the Quest games, HeroQuest, Advanced HeroQuest, and Warhammer Quest, it's been obvious the goal has always been to encourage players to buy more Citadel miniatures and introduce players to more Warhammer. And introduce the world, if you will. Yeah, this one is clearly about getting people to buy more Citadel miniatures. Like that's clearly one of the, which is an advantage. If you have all these miniatures, you can do a lot more than Warhammer did. Oh, excuse me, HeroQuest did. But HeroQuest is just sitting there with everything in the box. You don't have to go and buy more miniatures. If you've got this line of miniatures to sell, it makes sense to have all these miniatures have the rules for them in here. And I guess that's why it was just Skaven in the box. Well, no, the character sheet is in the back right here, but that's not filled out. It says that you've got your 4 heroes. So that's a blank character sheet right there. But I don't see. I still have not seen like the filled out character sheets for the heroes. But yes, we've looked at the blank character sheet on its side right here. But that doesn't tell me like, so weapon skill, bow skill. No, strength is here. We do have a strength score. So strength was here, but you're not modifying your toughness roll by strength, but you do have a speed, you do have a strength score. But like, I don't know how many fate they start off. Yeah, RGM would pre-generate the dungeons or use a dungeon set, eliminating the at the table downtime. Yeah, there should be no reason why you can't do that, right? Pre-generate the entire dungeon. That's more prep time for the game master. An advantage of HeroQuest is that the game master has almost no prep time. I mean, you can be Zargon and hey, I'll be Zargon, and if you've got the book, there isn't that much to read. You can be Zargon while other people are getting things together, prepping all your Zargon stuff. Gamer's Quest says, you see HeroQuest quest created in White Dwarf and the Marvel Winter Special, and GW is recommending additional miniatures for those quests. Well, it might not have been Milton Bradley's objective. Right. Page, thank you. 33. I mean, as you can see, this is quite a long book. Lots of, okay, here they are. Okay, finally. Okay, so, oh, no, actually, look at who we got here. We got Rogar the Barbarian, the classic from HeroQuest. Ladril the High Elf. So here is the HeroQuest interpretations. Telor the Human Wizard. Durgan the Dwarf. Let's go. Okay, so here's our Magnus. Let's go to Heinrich the Human Warrior. Has a weapon skill of 8. A bow skill of 8, but then it's been adjusted to 6 because of the armor he's wearing. He's got a strength of 6. He's got a toughness of 5, but because of his armor he's wearing, he's going up to 8. Speed is dropping from 8 to 6. Bravery of 9. Intelligence 8. He's got 2 fate points. This wizard over here also has 2. So you must start out with 2 fate points. And the number of wounds they can take are 4 for Heinrich and 3 for the wizard. 4 for the elf and 5 for the dwarf. So 2 fate points and between 3 and 5 wounds. No, and the elf is carrying 6 arrows. Only 6 arrows. So the dwarf does add +2 to rolls to spot and disarm traps. I noticed it said that anybody could disarm traps. I was like, oh, I didn't mention this last time, but that kind of takes away what some kind of the special element of the dwarf in HeroQuest. But here it says add +2 to rolls to spot and disarm traps. So how do they deal with here? Here, the barbarian. The barbarian has weapon skill 8, bow skill 6, strength 7, 2 fate points again, intelligence of 6, 5 wounds. This elf over here, it's nice that you have a variety of different pre-generated characters. The equipment includes a spell book, dragon armor, and open window only. 2 spell components, healing potion. Adds +1 to surprise rolls. This wizard has a spell book, 4 spell components, 10 feet of rope and iron spikes. And the dwarf over here, this dwarf has 4 wounds. So you get some variety, 2 different types of dwarves. Impossible to score critical hit, plus roll to spot and disarm traps. So like with the armor here, the barbarian's wearing no armor. This dwarf is wearing leather armor, which gives me -1 bow skill, +1 toughness, and speed -1. The shield gives me -1 bow skill, +1 toughness. Has no effect on speed, which is why I'm -2 bow skill, +2 toughness, and -1 speed. Yeah, you're gonna be. He needs more. He's gonna be rolling for trying to to find those arrows a lot. Okay, well, I have got things to do. I'm going to be sitting here working. I kind of want to work with the AI music video, but I've got other things I've got to do for the cultists. So, and also see about those tumblers and things. So, all right, let me give, if you're here, let me put the Discord server link. If you are not part of the Ravenkeep Discord server, I have often forgotten to do that. But let's go ahead and copy the Discord server link. Let me drop this into the chat. Discord link, Ravenkeep Discord server. If I can type. All right. Later, everybody. Have a great day. Go forth, be creative, be constructive, and I will talk to you later.